Hi guys. So week 4 of poetry. We have 2 new poems that I'm going to introduce to you today, and then next week you'll have 2 more new poems, and then we're going to head off poem versus poem the following week. So then you'll see a repeat of poems, and you'll evaluate them in a little different, deeper way, and then we'll whittle that list down to the top list, and that will also take us through the rest of the school year in this weird time of COVID. So the first poem I want to talk about, I want you to have it open. So open the Google form, and then you'll have the video playing. You don't have to watch me on this video, but I can tell if you're not watching the video, your score shows it. So remember, if you choose not to watch the video, you can't do this assignment again. But if you watch the video and you take your time and you go through and you understand it, it's just going to help you even more. And I'm going to go over every single question. So hopefully you're making good choices and not quick, sloppy choices, because quick, sloppy never works out well for you. So the first poem we're going to read is Eating Alone. So you have that one up here. And you can see the pictures, a gardening scene that I borrowed from somebody's website, just to get you an idea of that garden. Some of you don't have a garden, and some of you have very beautiful gardens. So you can see in this poem, it's 23 lines long. Remember, a poem is made up of lines, and lines are grouped into paragraphs, and those paragraphs are called stanzas. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stanzas. And you can see like the first stanza is 7 lines long, and the second one is 7 lines long, so that's uniform. But then the third stanza is 5 lines long, and the last stanza is 4, so it doesn't really follow a pattern. And if you look at the ends of the words, onions, cold flames, my vanishes, onions, spigot, nothing rhymes. So it's free verse poetry. At this point, if you're missing the free verse poetry, you're not listening. So hopefully you're changing your ways a little bit. So this poem, I think, is really accessible, especially if you've ever dealt with loss before. Loss of a loved one, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, cousin, because it's about loss, and it's a beautiful metaphor that we're going to read through. So I love this poem, but it's a sad one. So it's called Eating Alone by Lee Young Lee. I pull the last of the year's young onions. The garden is bare now. The ground is cold, brown and old. What is left of the day flames in the maples at the corner of my eye. I turn. A cardinal vanishes. By the cellar door, I wash the onions and then drink from the icy metal spigot. Once, years back, I walked beside my father among the windfall pears. I can't recall our words. We may have strolled in silence, but I still see him behind that way, left hand braced on knee creaky, to lift and to hold to my eye a rotten pear. In it, a hornet spun crazily, glazed in slow, glistening juice. It was my father I saw this morning, waving to me from the trees. I almost called to him until I came close enough to see the shovel leaning where I had left it in the flickering deep green shade. White rice steaming, almost done, sweet green peas fried in onions, shrimp braised in sesame oil and garlic, and my own loneliness. What more could I, a young man, want? So, pretty simple poem, but I'm going to go through it stanza by stanza to make sure you understand what's going on. So I've already answered the first couple of questions. So let's look at the first stanza. So the speaker in the poem, so remember, speaker is like the narrator in a poem, it's the person talking. And they pulled the last of the green onions from the garden. So green onions can stay in the ground. You want to keep them in the ground as long as like you use them as you need them. So they pulled the last of the onions. So you plant onions in spring and they grow during the summer, and then they grow pretty fast, but you can harvest them, but you want to harvest them before it freezes. So I know it's fall because all the onions have been pulled now. And the second line says the garden is bare now. So everything else has been cleaned up and the ground is cold. That also tells you that, it's late fall, almost winter, and it's brown and it's old. So your garden, when you all the plants are done, you've pulled them or harvested everything you could. And then I also know it's fall because it says, what is left of the day flames in the maples at the corner of my eye. So maple trees are those beautiful trees that turn red and orange, kind of like you strike a match in the fall. And they've got all the colors. Like some maples will be just bright, bright red, just that beautiful, beautiful color. So you know that the sun is going down and that the maples are in the fall colors. And a cardinal vanishes. So a cardinal's a red bird. So there's a cardinal, and it just shows them a moment in time where the cardinal like takes off and flies. And so by the cellar door, it's one of those cellars kind of like in the Midwest where you go into the cellar for a tornado, or you keep your produce, your potatoes, your sweet potatoes, your onions down there. It keeps it cold, like underneath the house. So by the cellar door, there's the spigot for the hose for the house, but it doesn't talk about a hose. So wash the onions, get all the dirt clunks off, and then drinks from the icy metal spigot. So pretty much just establishing a season of fall. The garden is done. And then in stanza 2, the speaker has a flashback. And the speaker says once years back, he was doing this, and he was walking beside his father. Now, if you have a pear tree in your yard, you're super lucky. But it talks about windfall pears. So if you have a pear tree, or you know somebody who has a pear tree, pears, they're not super tall trees, but when pears ripen, they ripen all of a sudden, and then they fall to the ground. And the object is to either pick them right before they fall, or when they fall, you have to get them like right away, like within 15 minutes. What happens is they start to decompose, and they are filled with so much sugar that bees go nuts over pears. So if you leave your pears out for a couple days on the ground, they are soft, and bees just kind of attack them, and they just eat and eat and eat, and you can pick up the pear and they're still eating. They have no idea. They're so sugar coma induced. So he talks about once years back, he was walking beside his father, and there's some pears that have fallen on the ground, and he can't remember the words of the conversation, like what they were talking about. And he says, well, maybe we were strolling in silence. So he remembers looking at his father, seeing him behind, and you know the father is old or has issues associated with age, like arthritis, because his left hand is braced on the knee, and that knee is creaky. So imagine bending over, and he's using that knee for support, and then he picks up a pear off the ground, and in that pear is one of those bees. Just drinking up the juice in there, a hornet. So that's a very interesting concept. We know the father's old. We know this happened in the past. And the bees eat the pears because they're sweet, but because they're also decomposing. So you have signs of age in the way the father bends down to get the pear, but also he holds up to the speaker like, this is decomposing, and one day I will too. So just that moment of time and the circle of life, right? So then stanza 3 takes us back to the present. It was my father I saw this morning, waving to me from the trees. So sometimes it happens to me where I think I see someone, and it's a shadow, or it's a movement, or it's nothing. And so that happens to the speaker. They think they see somebody waving from the trees. And the speaker thinks it's his father. He almost calls out to him. Like he almost, Dad. And then he came close enough to where he thought it was his father waving, and he realizes it's a shovel. Now the shovel is a symbol. So we talked about the bee and the pear is decomposing, and the father's showing the age and this decomposition. You see a shovel, and so maybe you've already gotten there. So shovels have to do with death as well, because a common way, not the only way, but a common way when somebody passes is for them to be buried, and they are buried using shovels. And so he thinks he sees his father, but he sees the shovel, so it's another reminder that his father has passed, and it's leaning where he left it in the flickering deep green shade. So a bit of imagery there, so you could picture that. He mistook the shovel to be his father. And in the last stanza, he talks about he's cooking dinner. So he's white rice. He's got the sweet green peas. They're fried in the onions that he harvested. He's got shrimp, what he's cooking for dinner. And then he says at the very, very end, it's my kid getting her dog. You want the dog? Get the dog and go. God. And so then he says, I'm lonely. I miss my father. I miss this tradition of us gardening together. And he says, what more could I, young man, want? So that's the first poem I want you to analyze. So I think I gave you a lot of hints about the questions. The theme of the poem, I think I got that one too. And then there's a question there that says the mood of the poem is one of loneliness. So I want you to think about, as I talked about, where, he shows a sense of lonely. And there's only really one line that goes with that. And everything else, I think, is there. So you're going to evaluate that. So go ahead and pause.